I mean, I could just hammer home the fact that like, if you choose to eat a ketogenic diet, you eat yourself into a carbohydrate intolerant state. No questions asked.
Hey everybody, this is Klaus from Plant-Based News. I'm with Dr. Cyrus Kambata, who's a nutritional biochemist, and we're talking about Halle Berry's low-carb keto diet. So rather than like talking about the theory, which we've spoken about before, I know Cyrus, let's just look at Halle Berry's meal plan. So she said recently in the media, since getting into keto, I don't usually eat a traditional breakfast. I'm a huge fan of bulletproof coffee, so I typically brew myself a nice coffee and blend it with butter, MCT oil, and collagen, sometimes a bit of cream. How do you respond to that?
Okay, bulletproof coffee was made by a gentleman who does not have a nutritional science background. He's an entrepreneur. He does not really fully understand the ins and outs of nutritional biochemistry, and therefore, when you're inventing a coffee that has butter and collagen and MCT oil in it, effectively what you're doing is you're taking a liquid that has some significant health benefits to it, and you are adding high fat ingredients that that will increase the overall fat content of that particular drink. Now, the reason why bulletproof coffee is popular is because what it's supposed to do is take the caffeine and sort of extend its life. So rather than the caffeine just kind of like hitting you and then disappearing, by having these fatty compounds inside of the coffee itself, it's supposed to extend the sort of shelf life of that caffeine so that you feel the effects for a longer period of time. Let me put it this way. Bulletproof coffee, in my opinion, is the farthest thing from a health beverage. If you truly want to maximize your health, what you would do is you would eat foods that have a significant quantity of micronutrients and a significant quantity of plant-based carbohydrate energy. Coffee has neither one of those two, especially bulletproof coffee that again has a bunch of animal-based products and collagen as an example, which is a breakdown product that you buy off the shelf. Okay, we're looking for whole foods, and none of that fulfills that criteria. And the total fat content of that meal is something that I would walk away from any day of the week, and not a fan even remotely.
Wow, that's super powerful. And the next thing she says is, I sip on my frothy drink throughout the morning and love the fact that the fat in it fuels my body and that it gives me a steady stream of caffeine and energy to start the day with. Is that even possible, what she's talking about in terms of the way fat fuels her body and her energy?
So yeah, so people who drink the bulletproof coffee will constantly say that the fat content of the coffee is what allows the caffeine to act over a longer period of time. I am not 100% sure if from a biochemical perspective that the fat content is actually what's elongating the shelf life or elongating the activity of the caffeine. However, I will say that there are millions of people around the planet who are consuming it and reporting the same effect, that the caffeine content of the coffee ends up lasting over a long period of time. So I do believe that that is the effect that people get from it. From a nutritional biochemical perspective, I'm going to have to go do a lot more reading to find out if the fat is actually elongating the caffeine's shelf life. But the fact of the matter is the fat content is extremely high. And people like to believe that when they're consuming that all of a sudden they just turn into a magical fat burner. That all the fat that they're consuming, whether they're drinking or eating it, turns their body into a fat burning machine. And there's a whole bunch of problems with that methodology that we can get into in detail.
Mm-hmm. She then says, if I do feel like cooking up a morning meal, that I keep a simple scrambled eggs, peppers, and onion with a side of avocado.
So a meal containing scrambled eggs, peppers, onions, and avocados has sort of, I guess, three components, which I like, and one component which I strongly don't like. I like the peppers, I like the onions, I like the avocado, okay? I'm not a huge fan of the scrambled egg. I'm not a huge fan of eggs in any way, shape, or form because there's many reasons why. We've written about this before, and I can go into a little bit of detail here. Eggs contain, the white of the egg is 100% protein. Okay, it's called ovalbumin, and then the yolk contains fatty acids and cholesterol. Okay, the quantity of cholesterol and fatty acids inside of the yolk unto itself is relatively high. So when you're consuming eggs on a daily basis, what you're actually doing is you're putting a transient increase in fatty acid and cholesterol content into these things called chylomicron particles, which then end up going and transporting fatty acids and cholesterol to tissues all throughout your body. Every time you eat these foods, they're high in fatty acids and cholesterol, you end up causing a transient spike in the amount of fat and cholesterol inside of your blood. If you're doing that for breakfast and or lunch and or dinner over the course of time, you end up with chronically higher cholesterol values and chronically higher fat values in circulation. Now, people who consume eggs, we wrote about this in our book, people who consume eggs end up having higher risk for colon cancer. That's a problem. People who consume eggs are at a higher risk for blood glucose anomalies and prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. That's a problem. So even though people like to believe that eggs are the perfect protein and that as long as they consume a couple of eggs per day, everything will be fine, the truth is if you look at the data, you'll find a different story. And personally, I'm a scientist. I look at the data and the data tells me everything I need to know.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. Right, let's move on. So the next bit of the meal plan is around 2 o'clock or so, I'll make myself lunch. If I'm craving something cozy, I'll make a simple soup loaded with different vegetables and a protein and top it with some cheese. What's your take on that?
If you are eating a fat-rich diet, it is biologically extremely challenging to also eat carbohydrate-rich foods within the same, 6 to 12 to 24-hour period. So if you choose to eat eggs and or bacon and or shellfish and or red meat or white meat or dairy products, good luck eating carbohydrates. It's not going to work. From a biochemical perspective, the two of them are completely different species and they don't work. You can't metabolize both of those types of food in an efficient manner. So if you choose to increase your fat content, you got to keep your carbohydrate content low. Vice versa, if you choose to lower your fat content, it gives you the opportunity to increase your carbohydrate content. But for people who are eating a ketogenic diet, they choose to eat a lot of fat, and they operate under the assumption that carbohydrates are bad for them, so they have to keep their carbohydrate intake low, and therefore they gravitate towards carbohydrate-poor vegetables and fruits, right? Berries, onions, green peppers, and non-starchy vegetables. And that's pretty much all you can eat from the plant-based world.
And then she says, otherwise, I go for a big salad. I always start with lots of greens, then add veggies like tomatoes, olives, and green and red peppers. From there, avocado and some sort of vinaigrette dressing made with olive oil and spices. Add healthy fats. I top it all off with some sort of protein like shrimp, chicken, beef, lamb, or fish. 2 quick questions, Cyrus. Is olive oil healthy? And number 2, can any amount of animal protein be healthy?
So the question is, do I consider olive oil to be a health food? And personally, I'm speaking again from the perspective of living with diabetes and teaching people how to eat, to maximize their diabetes health. When you're living with any form of diabetes, especially if you're living with any form of diabetes, consuming oil in your diet, olive oil, MCT oil, canola oil, or coconut oil, all of these versions of oil will increase your blood glucose values. No questions asked. It's not going to do it immediately. What will happen is that you consume the oil now, and 6 to 12 hours later, your glucose is going to start rising. And it prevents you from being able to eat carbohydrate-rich foods. So do I consider olive oil and other oils to be health foods? The answer is no, I absolutely do not. And I'm personally not convinced on the research that consuming oils is beneficial for heart health. In fact, I see it the opposite direction. And that consuming oils actually leads to increased concentration of fat inside of your blood, which can then lead to other problems like insulin resistance and or a difficulty losing weight in the long term. The next question is, can people consume animal products in their diet? And if so, how much is considered safe? And my answer to that is that if you choose to have a little bit of animal products in your diet, that is a personal decision, and that's okay. It's totally fine. How much would I recommend? I would personally not recommend consuming anything more than a few servings per week, if that's what you choose to do. If you're looking for optimal health, I would recommend eating the majority of all your calories from plant-based foods, and again, unprocessed plant-based foods. And if you choose to have a little bit of animal products in there, keep it to something like 4 servings a week or so. And if you can do that, then you're going to be benefiting from a strong collection of of both macro and micronutrients from the plant-based world.
Okay, so the last bit, just to finish off, and then you just give your thoughts on this last bit. Around 6 o'clock, I sit down with my kids to have dinner. I usually don't need much at this point, so I often go for some grilled vegetables with plant-based protein like chickpeas. I also love cauliflower mash at dinner. When in doubt, though, I go for the same veggie protein fat combo I have at lunchtime. Cyrus, your thoughts?
I mean, I could just hammer home the fact that, like, if you choose to eat a ketogenic diet, you eat yourself into a carbohydrate intolerant state. So again, let's just think about it from the top down. People with type 1 diabetes and people who are, trying to overcome chronic disease have been brainwashed into believing that carbohydrates are bad for them. And so as a result of that, they minimize their carbohydrate intake and they maximize their fat intake. But what they don't realize is that by doing that, by eating more fat on a daily basis, you squash your carbohydrate tolerance. Because the two of these, fatty acids and carbohydrates, are not friends with each other, and they will never be friends with each other. And from a biochemical perspective, the two of them cannot be metabolized efficiently at the same time. So if you eat a high fat diet, you are squashing your ability to consume carbohydrate-rich foods. And when you do that, you end up having to continue to eat more fat and more cholesterol-rich foods and non-starchy vegetables and greens. That's the only way you can eat plant-based foods. And in my professional opinion, that is not the right approach. The right approach is to lower your fat intake and increase your quantity of carbohydrate-rich plant-based foods. And when you do it that way, you end up with great blood glucose control and great results today and exceptional results 5, 10, 15, 20 years into the future.
Thank you so much for the interview, Dr. Cyrus Kambata. I really, really appreciate it. If you're watching this, let us know down below what you think. If you want to hear more from Dr. Cyrus Kambata, who's, as I said, a nutritional biochemist, and his business partner, Robbie Barbaro, they're both New York Times bestselling authors. They've got an exclusive free 90-minute seminar, which I'll link down below. So it's about heart health and much, much more. They've got some simple hacks to reduce your cholesterol, blood pressure, and triglycerides. So it's a really, really great seminar. Please check the link down below.